Welcome to the video. Today I'm going to do a competition entry for Alex at Beer and Vinyl. The link to his channel is in the description below. And he set a challenge for us, and that is to select 5 albums that you associated with 5 people that you love, care about, or cared about. It's kind of the first things you think about when you associate music with these people. Now, I'm not going to select an album that represents my relationship with my other half, Jill. Despite being together for over 30 years, we don't have our song, but admirers of Born to Run will tip a hat to the fact that I had a girlfriend in the 1980s for a few years who was called Wendy. But I'm not going to talk about her. So I'm kind of limiting this to people where music was a big thing in our lives or associations together. So the first one I'm going to do, oh, by the way, and selecting the 5 people is being tricky. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of refer back to a video I made a couple of years ago called Gratitude, which was one of my walk and talk videos where I was just reflecting on people who had been mentors to me, inspirational for me in my career, who or life as it were. So there's one person I'm going to refer to who wasn't in that video but was very important to me when it came to music, and I'll come to him in a moment. So I am going to start with my parents, and there's not one but there's 2 albums that really represent their musical influence on me. And the first one was Joe Loss Plays Glenn Miller. My parents, um, probably, I think it's in the 50s, they used to go dancing all the time. And they love swing, big band music. And Glenn Miller was big for them. And all the way through my childhood, my dad would be playing records, and this would be on the turntable, one of the handful that was never seemed to be off the turntable. But he also morphed his musical taste, and he dominated. A bit like a bit like in our house, is that my mother didn't really pick the records, but she went along with it. And the other thing he got into was this one, the Phase 4 World of Burt Bacharach, but it's not Burt Bacharach. It's Ronnie Aldrich and his 2 pianos. So it's some orchestral, easy listening album, which has got Burt Bacharach tunes on the back of it. And what's characteristic of both of these is that they're both budget releases, because my dad was massively into cheap records. So even to this day, when I think about them and their music, I think about these 2 albums. I haven't played these albums. That I actually acquired them by accident in a big classical and easy listening collection that I picked up 10 or 15 years ago now. Much of it is still behind me over there, still in the process of being sought out and dispensed with, apart from the good stuff. My best mate in my early years was a guy called Mick or Mickey, and whilst I was into Genesis, he was into Wishbone Ash, and this is Wishbone 4 from 1973, I think it is. 1973, yeah, 1973. Wishbone Ash. What do you know about Wishbone Ash? Well, slightly folky, slightly progressive, slightly hard rock, a really nice blend. And they had twin guitars. And it wasn't a lead guitar and a rhythm guitar. They kind of mixed and matched. And one of the great things about this particular band is that their songs were very, very well crafted. It wasn't improvisation. It wasn't just blues rock. It had all of those influences, and the guitar lines were very clean and very melodic. So these songs, although they're of their time, they do still sound absolutely great. This album followed Argus, which was their classic, but this has got some lovely tracks. And how appropriate. Side two ends with about an 8 minute song called Everybody Needs a Friend. But it's just all of it. So many things to say. Ballad of the Beacon, Rock and Roll Widow. Yeah, great album. Really good album. But it's like I said, of its time. Um, when I started work, another lad started at the same time as me, a guy called Brian. And Brian and I were best of mates for 10, 10 years, 15 years, maybe 20 years. And we worked together for the first 5 years, and we did dozens, probably, well, between 100 and 200 gigs together. We went everywhere together, including festivals. And when I think about him, I think about Elvis Costello because he always seemed to be one step ahead of me. I mean, we both read the music press, but he was a bit more daring than I was back in the day. And of course, Brian's no longer with us. 5 years ago, he sadly died prematurely. And but when I think about all the bands we saw and all the music that we consumed, there's one album I keep going back to, and that is Backstreet Crawler's Second Street. Now, Backstreet Crawler were Paul Kossoff's band, and Paul Kossoff, of course, was the lead guitarist in Free. Paul Rogers on vocals, of course. We He saw them. I didn't get to see Backstreet Crawler. I saw Crawler later, but I didn't see Backstreet Crawler because Paul Kossoff died of a heart attack on a transatlantic flight, and the tour was cancelled. And me and Brian had front row seats. But this is great, kind of bluesy rock, but definitely of that early 70s vintage. So it's blues influence, but it isn't a blues album by any stretch of the imagination. Great guitar solos, good singing by Terry Wilson Slessor, and it finishes appropriately with a track called Leaves in the Wind. Bit like life, and I guess a bit like us in life, especially when I think of Brian. So there you go. R.I.P. Brian. Um, Couple more. When I went to college, 1981, um, I became good mates with a couple of friends, and one of them for a very long time. And he was massively a guy called Robin, and he was massively into this band, Blue Oyster Cult. Now, I never got Blue Oyster Cult, although I've seen them. I saw them in the 70s on the Spectres tour when it was all about lasers. Um, this was this was released before that tour. Um, and I never and I saw them fairly recently. I saw them with supporting Deep Purple when they were atrocious, but that was probably because of the sound. They were a support act. But I also saw them in Nottingham about 5, 7 years ago, or something like that, and they were absolutely superb. Classic rock gig in a classic rock venue, Rock City in Nottingham, and they were brilliant. But this is the reason why I never really got them is that I was into Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin, Richie Blackmore's Rainbow, following Deep Purple, of course, and I always thought Blue Oyster Cult were a bit light. They weren't really kind of heavy in the way that those other bands were. But I kind of completely disregarded and it went right over my head the psychedelic influences. And I still like those first three albums of theirs the best. But this is a great live album, and Blue Oyster Cult fans will appreciate this, I'm sure. And they are still touring today. And even though that support slot with Deep Purple was disappointment, they still put on a great show. They're still a good band. And then finally, a friend of mine, Michael, he and I didn't know each other as we were growing up with Bruce Springsteen. But when Springsteen reformed the A Street Band, we'd met and became really good friends. And our first gigs together, seeing Bruce, was for the Rising tour. Probably the most emotionally charged tour Springsteen has done. And Michael and I saw Springsteen just over a week ago in Cardiff. Still has it. There's no one comes close in terms of putting on a live show with that connection to the audience, that emotional connection to the audience. And I'm seeing Springsteen again, maybe for the final time, next week in Sunderland. So yeah, Michael and The Rising. So 5 albums, kind of 5 people, including a couple, which is my parents, that I kind of care or cared about. I had good relationships with, around, and we talked about music a lot. And that's my competition entry. So I'll see you on the next video. So thanks for watching this one. See you later.